Welcome, everybody, to session 2, Data to Action for Student Parents in Texas. We're going to take a minute and just admit people from the waiting room, and then we'll get started. Okay, good morning, everybody. We'll be letting folks in as they come in, but we're so excited to see you for session 2 of our Data to Action series this summer at the Texas Success Center in partnership with the Urban Institute. We're going to be using our new parenting status data today to improve the resources available at our colleges, engage students, and strengthen pathways. I'm very excited for this partnership that we have between the Urban Institute and the Texas Success Center. Next slide, please. So far, this has been a very fruitful opportunity for us to tap into the expertise of the Urban Institute so that we can build systems and structures that best support our student parents in our Texas community colleges. It's been even more wonderful to think about this in our Pathways framework, and so I hope to give you the opportunity to learn more about that today. Next slide. With us today from the Urban Institute are Teresa Anderson, Nathan Sick, and Kimberly Salazar. They'll be running our session today, and we're very thankful for them for coming and sharing with us their student parent family at the center framework, as well as their larger Data to Action project, so that we can engage in that work here in Texas. Next slide, please. So just a little framing context for us today. We are at the Texas Success Center, and hopefully many of you are part of your Pathways teams on campus. But the work that we've been doing collectively across the state has been to redesign the student experience. And if some of you have been around through the process from Texas Pathways to Talent Strong Texas Pathways, you may remember that we originally conceived of this linearly, understanding that we accepted students from all different walks of life, all different starting points, helped them connect with a career-focused pathway, enter into their program, progress through that and succeed, and then head off to a four-year university, perhaps, or the workforce. And what if you could go back one more, I'm sorry, Nathan. What we've learned is that learning is less linear and more cyclical. And so while we see that still occurring this time, we still have those four components of the student success experience. We understand that our students, particularly at community colleges, will be coming back to us, hopefully, on many different occasions for lifelong learning. And so when we think about the student success experience, we're thinking about it cyclically at Talent Strong Texas Pathways. Next slide, please. But the work that we do at our colleges to operationalize this experience is organized into 4 pillars. So these are the practices that we're actually implementing on our campuses. And so pillar 1 is mapping pathways to student end goals. And here we're really thinking about what the student's goal is and then designing the programs to help them meet those goals. In pillar 2, we're helping students choose and enter a pathway. So this is really thinking about that front door experience, but reaching that front door experience back into the middle and high school and also into our community where we're having our students enter from and giving them career exploration and early exposure to their field of interest as they come and join us. Pillar 3 is keeping students on their pathway. And this is where it's all hands on deck. So everybody from the student services side of the house and the faculty side of the house working together to ensure that students have the information they need and the resources they need to continue forward. And then in pillar 4, ensuring that they are in fact learning what they need to be successful in their program and to be successful when they leave us, whether that's to enter the workforce or enter into a continuing degree. So as we're working today, we're thinking about this in the context of student parents. So if you go to the next slide. At the Texas Success Center, when we evolved to Talent Strong Texas Pathways, we had an intentional focus on belonging and wellness practices. And while these belonging and wellness practices are intended to serve all students that come to us, I want us today to just really think about this in the context of student parents as we're designing our processes and understanding the current resources that we have. So in Pillar 1, we want to make sure that we are including strategies to promote belonging in that planning phase when we're thinking about mapping and designing programs, and that we're creating a space where our resources are highly visible and centralized. This includes resources for your entire student population, but perhaps particularly for your student parents. When we're thinking about helping students choose and enter, our programs, we want to make sure that we have a planned intervention early on, preferably in the first term, that helps the students create a sense of belonging or connectedness to their college campus. And what might that look like for student parents in particular? We also want to understand our students' needs. So as they're coming to us, are we providing a basic needs assessment during onboarding? And if so, what are we doing with that information? Again, and how might this particular practice relate to student parents? As the students progress through, we want to make sure that we're having ongoing belonging efforts and that we're systematically communicating basic needs resources to our students, including our student parents. And then lastly, since the rubber meets the road much of the time in the classroom, and as a former faculty member, I understand oh so well the great immense honor it is to work with our students day in and day out. And so are we equipping our faculty advisors, staff, and administrators with the tools that they need to be able to support belonging and wellness? And in particular, what are we providing for those folks so they understand the unique context of student parents? So if you flip to the next slide. Some of you may be on your Pathways team and may very well this summer be participating in the Scale of Adoption Assessment. And this is the process by which the Texas Success Center measures where we are in the particular practices within the 4 pillars. So this is out in the field this summer. We follow up with interviews in the fall, and then we'll be able to tell you what we've learned soon thereafter. But I wanted to give you a sneak peek, or maybe not a sneak peek if you're on the Pathways teams, about specifically what these practices are that I overviewed in the pillar slides. So next slide. So what your Pathways teams are going to be thinking about this summer is whether or not, or at what level of scale, the centralized and highly visible location and hub for basic needs support, at what stage of implementation that may be at your college, and whether or not dedicated staff has been assigned to that, and whether or not the college has established a strategy to promote belonging. And if we think about Pillar 1, it's really kind of this planning and structural process. So your college teams will be thinking about this as they're doing the scale of adoption. And I'd encourage your implementation teams today to think about this in terms of the student parent populations that we serve. Next slide, please. In Pillar 2, the specific practices that your college teams are going to be measuring this summer have to do with at what phase you are in giving a student basic needs assessment, and then connecting students to available supports during onboarding. And many of you may have grappled with this one in your previous homework assignment in terms of what that might look like for collecting data on student parents. And whether or not the college has a planned intervention or experience in that first term to help students feel a sense of connectedness and belongingness. And many of you may have grappled with this one as well as you were doing your profile of existing resources. So next slide, please. In Pillar 3, this again is looking at how systematically and regularly we're communicating to students what supports are available. And we know that these supports are occurring on campus, off campus, and in many times in partnership with the community. So what does that communication plan look like with students? And how are we thinking about the intentional role of the college in ensuring students feel an ongoing sense of belonging with their program, with their college, and perhaps in the case of your student parents, with their peers as well. Next slide. In Pillar 4, you'll see here that we need to equip everybody that works with us to be able to provide these resources to our students. And so again, when you think about utilization rates, whether they're high or low or not as high as you would like, perhaps there are more people to bring into this work that we can train and equip with the tools that they need to connect the students to the resources that we have available. And so in Pillar 4, your Pathways teams will be thinking about the types of professional development and who's attending those professional developments in this space. Next slide. So if this was of interest to you, all of the essential practices, including those not specifically related to belonging and wellness, are measured and reported by the Texas Success Center. We have a series of briefs from the 2021 scale of adoption. The dates on here look a little different because it takes us some time to analyze 50 college responses. And we're just about to put out pillars 3 and 4 from the 2023 assessment. And so you can learn what your peer colleges are doing and perhaps reach out and network so that we really learn together about promising practices emerging in the field. As I mentioned, the 2024 assessment is out with colleges now, and so you can expect those briefs and analysis to start coming out next spring. So with that framing about Talent Strong Texas Pathways, I want to turn it over to our friends at the Urban Institute who are going to guide us through the Data to Action Summer Series Session 2 so that we can start to put some of these ideas into action. So Teresa, Nate, and Kimberly, I'm going to turn it over to you. And welcome, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Christina, for that introduction. And I second that. Welcome to everybody. Good morning. Thank you for attending. This is session two of the TSC and Urban Institute's Data to Action summer series for parenting students. Again, there was session 1, and I thought it was absolutely great, super fun to present. And we were aware that there was some really great conversation among everybody. And we really appreciated your attendance. So this is now session 2, the Data to Action process. So this is just a reminder of overall what you're going to accomplish throughout this summer series. So first, you're going to examine your institution's data capacity and reflect on data insights to inform pathway development. Next, you're going to build a profile of resources that can be shared with students and used to guide future actions. You may have already started on that. It was kind of some homework, but if you haven't, you'll have plenty of time to think about it today. You're going to develop specific strategies for using data to take action. Develop specific strategies for visibility and stakeholder engagement so that you can grow and amplify those actions and bring in new partners, new stakeholders, and increase the impact of this work. And you're going to learn about new best practices to engage students and leverage their expertise. All of this is focused on parenting students as a group with a lot of important opportunities to succeed and have a multi-generational impact. But a lot of the tactics that we're going to talk about and the strategies are applicable to other groups of students as well, and to the student body in general. So we're going to talk a lot about engaging students, working with students and trusting their expertise and their lived experiences, and also about how to use data to improve student supports in general. So even though we're talking, specifically about parenting students, a lot of this is applicable to a broad variety of student experiences. So the schedule, where are we at right now? And I hope everybody is having a great summer so far. And again, I appreciate your attendance in the middle of the summer here. The Data to Action process. So that was Tuesday, June 25th. I think most people here probably attended that or watched the recording, but if not, it's okay. There'll be time to catch up today. We are going to do a little bit of recapping. Here we are today, the profile of existing resources and data summary. We're also going to talk about parenting student engagement, and we're going to set up our little homework and activity for the next time, which is to do with stakeholder engagement and visibility. So that's what we're doing today. Very exciting. And then we've got session 3, which is going to talk about visibility and an action plan. So again, hopefully everyone will come away from here with at least a few concrete actions, no matter how small they are, that you could possibly take. So we're going to, again, talk a lot about that today. Could be actions related to data collection or data use. Could be actions related to improving the parenting student experience. There's a lot of different ways that you can take this. So we're really excited to hear what kind of actions people come up with and what y'all are planning to do at the end of this session. The sessions are sequenced, so attending all 3 is needed for completion. We are going to do a little bit of recapping today, but in general, it's good to attend them all. And recordings are available, which I think Christina just put a link to in the chat. So thank you for that. And yeah, please try and ensure that at least 2 core team members are at each session. All right, what are you going to accomplish today? Today, you're going to recap the D2A process and share insights from the session one Jamboard. So we're going to we're not going to spend too much time doing that, but we are going to recap some of the most important things from session one and share a little bit about what you all told us on all your Jamboards, which was super interesting. We're going to have a breakout session, a longer breakout session this time, where you reflect on your profile of resources and data summaries. And we're going to ask that you summarize key insights for the full group. Hopefully you have gotten started on those profile resources and data summaries, but if you haven't, you can spend the time during the breakout thinking about them today. So there's time to catch up if you weren't able to dive deep into your homework. We know everyone is very busy. You're going to learn about a rubric that can help you think about parameters and metrics for how to engage student, parent, team members, which we think is really important for success. And we've seen that be a very important metric of success for a lot of colleges we've worked with. We're going to have a second breakout session where you reflect on that student parent engagement rubric and think about how to work with students and engage them in any kind of projects that you undertake. And then you're going to be introduced to phase two, which is your homework, stakeholder mapping and a visibility plan, which again is going to, we're still going to be thinking about these actions, but the stakeholder mapping and visibility are essentially going to be a roadmap for amplifying those actions. So just some quick Zoom FYIs. You're going to be muted by default during the main session, non-breakouts. You should be able to talk, obviously, during your breakouts. And that's just because we have over 100 people. So too many people to be unmuted and able to chat freely. But we love to hear anything that you want to say in the chat and or the Q&A functions in Zoom to submit questions and or comments. I think the chat is probably preferable, but any way to submit information to us and we should be able to see it using Zoom. There will be a breakout room in which you'll be unmuted and able to talk to your colleagues. You will need to select the breakout room that corresponds to your college. We were hoping to drop you in automatically, but technically that didn't quite work out. I know it said that in the tech cheat sheet that we distributed, but you will need to select the breakout room that corresponds to your college. So you should see one. If you don't, please message us and we'll help you out. We'll get you into the right breakout. Also, if you're the only person in a college, we'll likely group you with another so that you all can at least participate in a discussion if you want, even if it is with a different school. So Jamboard, we wanted to just share some quick FYIs about the Jamboards. This is how we're going to collaborate during these breakout sessions. I thought it went really well last time. I know it's a little tricky to get used to a new tool, but everyone did a great job. And we learned a lot from what you all put on your Jamboards last time. It's a virtual sticky note board that you can fill with ideas. So it's basically a virtual whiteboard. It's just a place where you can add sticky notes that have ideas that you all think up while you're doing your breakouts. So you and your colleagues will collaborate using the Jamboard. It's pre-made specifically for your college, so you should be able to find one. You will be able to find one that is associated with your college. So you'll just page through to there. I'll give you the steps real quick. When prompted, use the URL or QR code on the slide to join the Jamboard. So there will be 2 Jamboards in each breakout because Jamboard has a limit for how many colleges we can put on any one. So there's 2 of them. And you'll see your college under the Jamboard that you should go to. So just look for your college and then use that URL or QR code to get to the Jamboard. Page through the Jamboards to the right to find the one that matches your school. They're alphabetical. You'll see that little Jamboard icon at the top, 1 of 16. So you'll just go through those paging to the right arrow until you find your college Jamboard. And you all should meet up there. Your whole college team should find that Jamboard together. And then click the sticky note icon on the left. It's that little icon that you can see there at the bottom. And then drag and drop it next to the question you want to answer. So when you click the sticky note, you should be able to enter some text, hit save, it should appear on the screen, and then you can just drag it next to the answer next to the question that you're trying to answer. I know it was probably a little bit of trial by fire in the first one. We didn't really quite enough instructions. So hopefully everyone's kind of familiar with it at this point, but we are kind of just recapping that because we know that the Jamboard can be a little confusing, but I think once you get the hang of it, it's a great way to share ideas. And you all did a great job at that before. Again, we used what, we looked at what you put in there. We're going to share some of that back to you. And it was great. Meet your fellow attendees. I know y'all have had a chance to collaborate a bit on teams in session 1, but please put any introductions in the chat. please rename yourself with your college affiliation. And I'm just realizing I never really introduced myself. Um, my name is Nathan Sick. I'm a research associate at the Urban Institute. I think we met and introduced ourselves in session one, but I know there are probably a few new folks here. So I just wanted to say hello. Really excited to be here. We do a lot of work related to parenting students, but also just post-secondary education in general at the Urban Institute, and career pathways, all kinds of different stuff. So again, we're really excited to be here and be doing this. And yeah, please put those intros in the chat if you want. Say hi to everyone, because again, it's great to have you all here. Also, a note for student team members, if you are a student on your college team, please let us know. Fill out this quick form and we'll follow up with you. And that follow-up is just to give you a little bit more information as a student about the data to action process, how you can be involved with it, how you can support your college. We want to give colleges ideas for how they can work with students, partner with them, engage them. We also want to help support students and let students know, how can you help your college? How can you engage? What to expect from a data to action process where a student can be a partner and ideally an equal partner in decision making and in learning. So I'm going to leave this here just for another 10 or 15 seconds because I've been paging through fairly quickly, want to get to the good stuff and get to the materials that we have today, but I want to make sure everyone has a chance to click this link. So I'm going to give it another 5. Okay, if you missed this, I believe it was put in the chat. So please just let us know if you missed this link and you would like to have it. All right, so I'm going to recap just some basic stuff. I'm going to go through, I hope not too quickly, but also, we want to get to the discussion for session 2. But what did we learn in session 1? Let's just kind of recap the most important things. We did a bunch of stuff in session 1. We met our colleges on our college teams. We know that not all of y'all have had chances to really work together closely, and you may have formed new teams. So hopefully you got a chance to have some good discussions on during the breakouts. We discussed why we are here, who are our parenting students as a demographic, as like a group of students. What do we know about them and the challenges and opportunities that they have? What are the new legislations that have been passed and the importance of supporting parents as they complete their degrees? We had a breakout to reflect on supporting student parents and why that might be important. We introduced the data to action process for parenting students, and that's something we're going to revisit a little bit today. We had a breakout to discuss the D2A process. That's how we abbreviate it, D2A. We talked about what we can accomplish from it. We learned how and when to collect parent and student data. So we gave you some concrete advice on how to do that. Now, I just want to note that we understand that a lot of folks could probably use even more advice. So we're interested in your thoughts on that and challenges that you're experiencing, but also we want to acknowledge that every school has unique data infrastructure, unique systems, and there's just a lot of intricate, changes that are required as you move forward in this journey. So we hope that we can continue to be of assistance and guiding and giving you advice there. So we had a breakout to do a data self-discovery where you thought about your institution's data infrastructure, where you're at now, and where you're headed. Again, it's a unique situation for every college. No two colleges have the same exact data infrastructure. We introduced our session 1 homework, which we're going to revisit today, a profile of resources and a data summary. And those are ways to think about what kind of resources you have available and what kind of data you also have available. There were some animations here that I missed. All right, so quick recap. What do we know about student parents at Texas community colleges? 27 to 31% of Texas community colleges are parenting. So that's somewhere between 186,000 and 214,000 students. So when you just think about the impact this has from a social standpoint, this is a lot of students. And then you have to think about their children as well and how many people this topic impacts. 71% of those students had a non-work study job, and they worked an average of 25 hours per week. So parenting students are oftentimes balancing work obligations, education obligations, and childcare obligations all at the same time. It's a lot. Student parents are more likely to be enrolled because of all those obligations. They had an average GPA of 2.81, which is slightly higher than their classmates without children. Despite that, parenting students often have lower persistence and completion rates, meaning they start out with a lot of academic promise, but frequently run into challenges and barriers that lead to not completing their education credentials at as high of a rate. Student parents have 1.9 children on average. So again, with around 200,000 students, that just tells you the kind of societal and multi-generational impact we're talking about here. Very important is that in 2023, Texas passed a new legislation, very strong legislation compared to a lot of other states, that banned discrimination against students due to their pregnancy or parental status, entitled pregnant or parenting students to take a leave of absence, required colleges to offer parenting students priority registration if it's offered to other groups, required reasonable accommodations for pregnancy, childbirth, and medical related conditions, required colleges to adopt a non-discrimination policy to protect parenting and pregnant students, required institutions to designate a support liaison for student parents, and required colleges to collect and submit data on students' parental status. That's a lot. So there's a lot of new aspects of this legislation. And again, it's very comprehensive compared to the similar legislation we've seen passed in other states. So in terms of this issue, it's a great step forward. So the payoff for states of supporting parenting students is very strong. Investing in student parents pays off for taxpayers through higher taxes and lower benefit receipt. So as parenting students complete their education at higher rates, which oftentimes they do complete at higher rates when they're offered supports and access to basic needs to manage the large number of responsibilities that they have and complete their education. Once they get those credentials, they frequently get better employment, which leads to lower benefit receipt and higher tax revenue, which over the lifetime of a parenting student having completed that degree is essentially much more than offsets the cost of supporting them to a higher extent through their education. So targeted support programming at public colleges pays for itself $5.36 societally for every $1 spent. So that's a very significant return. Spending $1 on targeted support on parenting students pays off fivefold for society, and that's in higher taxes and lower benefit receipt. So just an overall lower government taxpayer burden and a more productive working members of society. $3,000 annual scholarship pays for itself $1.73 per dollar spent. So another healthy return on investment. Affordable on-campus childcare pays for itself $1.24 per $1 spent and yields the largest increase in graduates. So maybe a bit more expensive, but still yields a positive return for society and helps parenting students complete their education. This doesn't even count all the personal benefits to students and family or broader benefits to communities. This is just looking at parenting students completing their education and then the lifetime of higher benefits to society that come after that. But there's many other benefits we're not considering there as well. So I just wanted to recap the advice we gave you. So we really encourage you to revisit session 1 and our documents that we'll link to and our recommendations to get some specific ideas, like very specific ideas. But again, we understand each college is a little different. But we covered some data collection options. You can collect data, which a lot of schools are trying to think about. When should we do this? When should we ask students for their parental status as required by this legislation? You've got initial enrollment is a great option, but usually can't necessarily be the only option because, as we know, parental status changes over time. Someone may enroll in your school, not a parent, but within a year they may be a parent. So initial enrollment is a great option to start, but it is typically not what we recommend as the only option. Another option is at term or course registration on a term basis, and then also periodic nudges, which could be a form when students log in. They could be triggered to see a form that asks them about their parental status. We are seeing a lot of schools in Oregon doing this. It remains to be seen exactly how successful it will be over time, but early results are promising in that you can ask students to answer this, you can ask them multiple times, and you can also put an option to update this on their student profile in their SIS, which is the main student information system. So these are great ways to collect data, and those are kind of the ones that we recommend. In terms of how often, again, this is one time only. Course registration is every term, and periodic nudges are as often as you want. You can bug students about it all the time. You can have it show up, once a term, very flexible. We also talked about surveys, which are very labor intensive, but do have some benefits. I know some folks use surveys for their submission this year. External databases, which you're not in control of, but can be useful for triangulating information. And then also manual flagging by staff, which is a lot of effort, but can at times be useful, but it's not something that we recommend. So really, we recommend that going forward, y'all think about a way using initial enrollment and a combination of either course registration or some kind of periodic nudge to collect this data. Again, just mentioning this, that data should ideally be collected annually or even every term so that you can understand who is a parent at any given time. All right, some helpful resources. This is our document that really dives more deeply into these technical recommendations. This is version 1.0. We are working to release a version 2.0, which we hope gets even more specific. Again, this won't be a full 100% roadmap for you if you are changing your data infrastructure, because everyone's data infrastructure has its own nuances. Everyone has set up their SIS a slightly different way, but we hope that this helps you get started, have some concrete ideas. We included some language you could use for questions, and a lot of pros and cons for different methods to use and different things to think about. So we hope it's helpful. And also please revisit session 1 to see us discuss that in more detail. And we're always happy to keep that discussion going. We also would love for you to take a look at our framework and roadmap for change to support pregnant and parenting students. Parenting students are at the center of at least 88 different policy structures. And I think it's 11 different policy areas. They navigate lots of complicated systems. Again, they're working usually. They're trying to find childcare. They don't have access to family care. It can be very challenging and expensive to find childcare, especially when they're balancing complicated schedules. And again, they're trying to complete their education and earn a credential. And balancing those three things can be a very big challenge, especially when you're trying to navigate complicated systems. So this roadmap talks about the future, how to eventually make these systems more accommodating to parenting students so that we can reap the rewards of those return on investments for society that we saw earlier, where a very modest investment in parenting students' success, huge gains for society in terms of a dollar amount, let alone the family impacts and multi-generational impacts that it can have. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Teresa, who's going to talk a little bit about the D2A process.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Of course, when I go to screen share, I lose my Zoom controls. Hello, everyone. I'm Teresa Anderson from the Urban Institute. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. Going to talk a little bit more. We got some feedback last time about wanting a little more clarity about the data to action process. So I'm just hoping to shine some more light on this and give a little more context about the data to action campaign. So as we showed last time, we had a whole map, but as Nathan described, student parent data collection efforts have been growing. And we were at a point in 2020 and 2021 where these were growing, but nobody really knew how to collect the data well. And it wasn't clear how to use the data to inform change, because data doesn't matter if nobody's looking at it or using it to inform action. So Urban developed a learning community of colleges in states with data collection mandates to work with them on data development and action to support student parents. And so this is a map of 10 grantees that we have been working with for about a year on college community of practice for the data to action campaign for parenting students. We have 5 colleges in Oregon, 4 in California, and a college system in Chicago and Illinois. And we're excited to be able to extend this work into Texas for this summer. And hopefully beyond. So we've been working in these states to try to generate insight that was going to inform both the data collection and the ways that data can be translated to meaningful change. So that was the data to action campaign for parenting students, building community among colleges, systems, and states that were thinking about student parents in a data and action oriented way, providing coaching and technical assistance, and informing policy in terms of guidance for both if new states were exploring legislative change, for regulatory change, and for implementation. We shared this slide last time, which I think it crossed people's eyes a little bit because it's a lot of detail. And this is all the detail for conducting a needs assessment and doing a stakeholder insight gathering effort, taking informed action, sustaining and deepening the work that relates to the overall 2-year data to action campaign. This summer, we are doing a condensed version of the coaching and technical assistance process for you all, tailored to the Texas state context. And the idea here is not that you are going to complete everything that other colleges are taking 2 years to work on, but that we can start a conversation and you all can feel prepared to dig in on some of this work in the coming year and maybe incorporate some of these ideas into your ongoing Talent Strong Texas Pathway work. So what we've asked for folks here, and I know every college might not have every one of these, but to be thinking about who the implementation team is that can be focusing on this work, including your college pathways lead or pathways team representative, student services or student affairs representative, institutional research or student data management representative, who can be great partners in this work, student parent liaison, which is the legislatively mandated role that was in the legislation that passed in 2023, and a current or recent parenting student. We say this is strongly recommended, and we're going to talk a bit more today about how and why that role is really valuable in pushing forward these conversations. So in the Data to Action Texas work, there's 3 components of what we're doing this summer. The data profile, who are your parenting students? What do you know about them for now, which is part of the homework that you all did coming into this session. The profile of resources, what resources do student parents have access to on and off campus? Again, part of the homework coming into this session. And the stakeholder mapping and visibility plan. How will you make this work visible and to whom? And that's part of what we'll be doing between this and the next session. And all of this is leading towards thinking about a vision and goals for this work, which will also be part of our work next week together. So that's kind of how this is getting framed in the context of the summer. And the stakeholder stakeholder mapping and visibility plan is part of the emphasis for today. So with that, I will pass it back to Nathan to do some recap of the really valuable insights that you all shared in the first session.
Thank you, Teresa. I'm hoping you see my slide now. I think you do. Okay, great. Thanks, Teresa. Sorry, just pulling my my side of things back up again. So again, we had, I think, a great session 1. We were really pleased with the kinds of discussion that everybody had, and we wanted to share back to you some of the main insights that came out of that. So we're going to share what came out of the Jamboards that you had. Of course, you'll have access to this afterwards, so you'll be able to see, and I think actually we even shared out the Jamboards with y'all. So we really wanted to share, what were the insights that came out of your discussions, and we thought it could help you hear about what were the most common themes across colleges so that you can kind of put your own thinking in context and maybe get some ideas from what other colleges thought was important during the Jamboard. So from the first Jamboard, we asked, why is focusing on parents in your college important? And the majority of you, the most common response was that parents could benefit from support. So this was after our introduction, contextualizing parenting students, and colleges did feel that, or you all felt in your Jamboards, that parents could benefit from support, and you saw that kind of multi-generational benefit, which again was the second most common, which is talking about how supporting parents can lead to a multi-generational effect. You also talked about how there was a large number of student parents. Some of you mentioned that was more than you expected. And you talked about how it was an institutional goal or a funding effort to support parenting students. And you talked about the importance of effective supports, data-driven decisions, addressing unseen populations, elevating student voice and empowerment, and legislative requirements. And I just want to note that there were some other responses. We didn't show, just to kind of keep this short and digestible, we didn't show responses that only appeared one time. So again, lots of different reasons why supporting parenting students is important. We asked you what was surprising from what you've seen so far. A lot of you talked about being surprised at how much parents need supports for better outcomes and how much they could benefit from that. The challenges of tracking parents, of survey fatigue, of implementing new technical solutions, etc. We talked about the lack of awareness that some students have of existing support. So some folks noted that there were supports that are available now that are underutilized by students who could maybe benefit from them. So suggesting that lack of information, maybe lack of just connecting students with those supports that could really help them. Again, there were some folks who were surprised at how effective the 2-gen approach was, the cost effectiveness, etc., and the outcomes, the legislative information. A lot of folks didn't know about the legislative change that's been happening. And some folks mentioned, again, that then they realized that there were. How does this relate to things you've been thinking about as part of the TSC pathways or in other discussions? By far, the most common response here was about connecting to basic needs, connecting students to basic needs. I think, I've been aware recently that the discussion around basic needs, as housing is increasingly expensive, as folks deal with mental health challenges in a very complicated world, as expenses increase and people have challenges meeting their basic needs, experiencing food insecurity, and experiencing a multitude of different challenges, including difficulty accessing childcare, the sheer expense of childcare for folks who don't have access to family care, etc. So connecting to basic needs is a huge topic amongst you all from what we heard in the Jamboard. It's something a lot of folks have been thinking about lately. A lot of folks have been thinking about how to get new increased course, credential, and transfer offerings. So again, there were different themes expressed within that, but a general theme of wanting to offer students new types of course, credential, and transfer offerings, whether more flexible or to meet different workforce or labor market needs or the needs of different student bodies. You've been talking about tracking parents, increasing a sense of belonging among parents, improving academic outcomes, economic mobility, fulfilling the legislation. So that's important too if you're required legislatively to do something, intensive or personalized advising. So these are all the topics that y'all have been thinking about already that you felt related to the discussion that we're having here. Do you have any questions about the D2A process? Is anything missing? You asked about the timeline of D2A and data collection. It would be helpful to have a simplified version of the process. You asked about ideas on how and when to collect data. You asked about dual enrollment in minor students. You asked about finding additional resources outside of the college. And you asked about changing data systems, which is a challenge. This was good feedback. We tried to incorporate this and discuss a little bit in session 2 about a simplified D2A process. Again, with how and when to collect data, we encourage you to check out our publications where we have given some recommendations and we've been talking about that. We can talk about it some more today and during the breakout sessions. It's something that we hope to keep building on. Dual enrollment and minor students. This is a topic that has come up at other colleges. And these students should be treated the same as they are in other demographic or data collection topics unless the state has given other guidance. But we definitely understand the sensitive nature of asking dual enrollment or minor students about the topic of whether or not they're parents. And we do think it's a tricky issue. But in general, you should treat it consistently with how you treat them with other data collection. So just keeping that consistent. Hopefully the profile of existing resources has helped start a conversation about what resources might be available. We know that resources can't just magically appear, that it's a big challenge, but hopefully you can have some interesting ideas for how to leverage community opportunities. Also, data system change is challenging, but it can also be an opportunity to thoughtfully design data collection from the get-go. So if you're redoing a data system, it's a lot of work, it's stressful, but it's a great time to sort of reimagine things. All right, so are the right people at the table? Are you missing any important perspectives? 18 colleges identified student parents as the most important perspective to them. That was the most common response by a lot. We're really happy about that. That's what we're going to be talking about later today. So we think that's great. What will be challenging about this work? Where can you get help to overcome barriers? A lot of folks mentioned response rates, survey fatigue, and self-reporting. That's something we've certainly experienced in our work relating to students and relating to other things like surveying programs, surveying employers, surveying anybody. This is a challenge right now. So we totally hear that and agree that it can be very difficult, but we want to think about strategies for how to engage students, how to make them feel comfortable and confident in sharing this information. And there's a lot of ways to do that through messaging and through taking actions. Increasing awareness of supports, the need for more supports, which is always a challenge because, again, you can't just make those appear out of nowhere, but it's good to leverage everything you can. Challenge is identifying the best approach, which hopefully we're going to come away from this with a bit more ideas there. Questions about how to implement a 2-gen approach, that can be a challenge. Campus partnerships, faculty engagement and policy, data availability, access and analysis, transparency, trust and privacy, need for and challenges with student-parent partnerships, and funding challenges. So that is a lot of different possible challenges and barriers. And so I think it's great that we're here discussing the way forward and thinking about how to overcome these barriers. A lot of folks used Colleague. Some used Banner and Genzabar. Some mentioned how they were relying on survey tools like Qualtrics to collect data. Some were using some kind of other information system. Maxient, Zogotech, Apply Texas, and PeopleSoft. These were all mentioned as ways that folks are collecting parent and student data. How did you collect and report data in May? This was the first time it was required. A lot of folks weren't really sure how they did it, or didn't have like a super clear answer there. A lot of schools used FAFSA. Some used Apply Texas or an application. Some were not able to collect in this first year. It's just understandable. It can be a challenge. Some used a survey. Some did implement a new question in their student information system, but that was relatively rare. Most were kind of getting something done that was a little bit temporary. And on that note, we asked, was this a permanent solution? 76% said nope. Some of them forcefully, some of you all said forcefully in all caps, no, this was not permanent. It was stressful. Some said it was okay, but could be improved. Nobody that we saw in any Jamboard said that their current situation was like ideal and didn't need to be improved on at all. Everybody either said, no, it wasn't permanent, or it was okay, but could have used a bit of improvement. How does your school use the data in the student record? Does the liaison have access? 7 colleges said their liaison has access to the data, while 4 said they do not. Many colleges said they do not currently use parenting data internally, but the ones that did use data to identify service gaps, help students navigate to resources, and to track persistence and completion. Schools used that to identify, did some targeted outreach, some communication outreach, etc., to help identify gaps, connect to supports, and to track persistence and completion. We think these are great goals, and there are even other ways as well that you can use data. What barriers are there to collecting data, and what do you wish you had? A lot of folks said it was too early in the process, or they had no good data. They weren't even sure what barriers there were because folks felt like, this was still so early in such a changing process. They identified challenges to determining the best analysis approach. We hope we've already given you at least some guidance there, but we know it's still a challenge. Survey fatigue and busy students and getting students' attention. We understand that's really challenging. Privacy concerns. The process is too much effort or cost. It's just too much of a challenge to add new items to the SIS. Lack of legislative clarity, so just wishing there were more guidelines there, and a need for better data on basic needs. These were some of the barriers to data. All right, so I am now going to turn it over to Teresa to recap the homework assignment and to talk about our first breakout session.
Thank you, Nathan. That's wonderful. And thank you all so much for being here with us. So hopefully this is not new to you because you've been thinking about this homework for the last month or so. But in case you need to access any materials, here's the link to the box folder, the QR code, and that'll be dropped in the chat as well. So there were 2 activities that we hope that you had some time to reflect on. And if not, we're going to give you some time to talk with your teams. Either way, whether you've made some progress or whether you're just still thinking about it right after I remind us what we're doing. So the first is building a profile of existing resources, which is adapted from a great resource called the Family Friendly Campus Toolkit. And the idea is to catalog all resources available to students and also note resources that you're planning to offer in the near future. And there's some great opportunities that come from doing this kind of cataloging. So there's an opportunity to reach out to potential partners that you might identify in your search that you haven't connected with previously. Learning about supports that you can refer students to that you didn't know about before. Putting together the work you did to put together a profile of existing resources can be used to create a web page or put on syllabi that can help raise student awareness. We heard a lot of colleges talk about how you have supports, but students don't know about them. So figuring out a way to communicate that even more clearly. You can fix issues you find, like errors on websites or missing information. Learning about barriers and informing campus staff so they can communicate students what to expect if there's paperwork requirements or other processes that are required to actually access these resources. That's helpful to be aware of. Identifying gaps and seeking resources to address those gaps where they exist. And a big issue is we can say, yeah, there's childcare around, but assessing the true availability of childcare options and other supports is a little bit different than saying that childcare exists somewhere. So this is an opportunity. We've heard colleges using these profiles to correct their website when there were incorrect instructions for lactation rooms on campus. We had one college did a full assessment of local childcare availability, including sort of the feasibility of actually getting into the available care. Another school is preparing a cheat sheet version of their profile that will live on their website and can be printed and shared with students. Many identified that there were links to resources that were buried on web pages and hard to see. And another school found that a new organization in their community that they're going to reach out to explore a partnership that can help with educational goal setting, course registration, and applying for financial aid and other processes. That college said, in all the events we've been to for sharing and discussing resources, not once have we heard about this. So it was really an aha moment for them to really take that moment to review what was available. I'm not going to go through all these in detail, but there were 10 categories of resources that were in that profile, which hopefully you had a chance to look at, and maybe you didn't get through all of them, but continue to iterate. And then the second piece was around summarizing institutional data. So the first step in a data to action campaign is having good data and then knowing how to use it. So what do you know about your parenting students now using data? And you can use data you developed for your May legislative submission, the FAFSA, another source, or a combination of sources. Because even if you feel like there's gaps and flaws in what you can say at this moment, I think that also provides an opportunity to think about where data development can be part of your vision and goals into the future. So with that was a real whirlwind summary, but we don't want to spend too much time recapping. We want to give you a chance to talk with each other. So we're going to have a chance for you to share your homework. On the left side are questions about the profile of resources. On the right are questions about the institutional data summary. Don't worry about writing down all these questions because just like last time, they will be in Jamboards that you can fill out with your college. What we'll be doing is opening those Jamboards in just one moment. As you'll note, there's two groups. So A through M is in group 1, N through W is in group 2. You can either scan that QR code or you can go to the link, which we will drop in the chat for each of the Jamboards. As Nathan said at the beginning, you just navigate, you navigate to the one that has your college name, and you'll also want to navigate to the breakout room that is named after your college. If we see that there's only one person in a breakout room, we might ask politely if we can combine you with another group because having a conversation is more interesting when there's more than one person in it. So with that, we'll send you off to the breakouts and Jamboards.
All right, it looks like people are moving, so we'll continue to help with that. If you are a partner joining us today and you're not from a college, you should see a room that says partners, and please feel free to join that room.
I think we're all coming back into the main session. I hope everyone had a good breakout. I'm gonna wait like another maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds or so. We're at 100 participants, so I think that's actually, yep, I think that's basically everybody. So Firstly, I want to just thank everyone again for the wonderful and productive breakout sessions. I know you're having some great conversations. We can see that momentum build on the Jamboards, whereas more and more ideas just start to fill them up, and it's just really exciting to see. Just perusing them, we saw a lot of great ideas and insights, and I know that even if not everything made its way onto a sticky note, I'm sure there were some great conversations going on. And again, I think, with this Jamboard, like, we really encourage you all to have spent your time on any topic that feels important to you. Anything that came out of this homework, regardless of how deep you got into it, that just helps you think about the future, helps you think about where there's gaps, what insights you have. So I hope there's some good conversations. It says here, recall that we asked that one person from the group be prepared to share a sentence with the key takeaway from your breakout conversation. We did forget to mention that before the call, which is okay, but just go ahead. If one person from your group, or if you're in your group and you have, a burning thought that you'd like to share, I think, if you're not sure who from your group is going to be doing that, it doesn't matter. I think go ahead and put any key takeaway, any one key takeaway in the chat, and it doesn't have to be like an overall big picture thing. It can be something really specific. In fact, I kind of encourage specifics if possible. Like, we talked about how we need to do X, or we talked about how there were gaps in X. I think that that would be really useful. We actually have about 10 minutes right now for this report out. So we'd love to kind of go over some of your thoughts, and nothing that you have is unshareable. Please share any thoughts that you have. And I just want to share while we're waiting for folks to do that. So we're going to look at the chat, but please put stuff in the chat. We had Kimberly share some insights that she saw, that folks were talking about, unsurprisingly, not enough childcare. We know that that's a challenge for a lot of folks. If you don't have family care, if you don't have grandparents nearby, or other family members or friends who could take on childcare, it can be a huge challenge. We found folks measuring persistence and retention, especially of those in a family care program. We saw the importance of partnering with programs like family care programs that are on campus, or family-oriented programs, and how useful those can be for the colleges that do have them. Not all colleges have such kinds of programs necessarily. We saw foster parents needing to be included in data collection. I saw some interesting statistics about the amount of veterans who were student parents being particularly high at one school. We saw folks talking about consolidating resources, the benefits of working across departments, having a longer survey with 2 or more questions receiving higher response rates, gaps in data collection, nudges being a future goal. So some schools talking about nudges. I saw another school talking about how they'd like to collect data every term. And let's see, I have some insights that I've collected, but I'd really rather focus on y'all's insights. So let's see. Does anyone have a solution for collecting data with colleague at registration for each term? I'd like to say that this is something that we kind of hope to delve into, so you should check back with us. I don't know if it's feasible for Urban to put out recommendations for every data system, but in working with different colleges, we've definitely experienced unique challenges to the various SIS programs that are out there. One of the solutions that we've seen, I can give you some concrete solutions to this, but actually implementing it obviously is something you should talk to your tech team about. We can't go into how to actually do stuff, but one college implemented a few colleges we've talked to implemented a pre-registration form. Not all colleges have this. Some colleges, you just get a link and it's time for registration. We've seen a number of colleges implement a pre-registration form, so a link that goes out before registration. And this form is mandatory. Students have to fill this out. So it's a mandatory data step, and you can add this question to it. You can say, we need to confirm some information, and you can add this question about parenting students. So we know of schools that send that out like 2 weeks before registration, and you have to fill this out. That's one way to do it. You can add a form. Now, one thing we've heard about is in systems like Genzabar, for example, we've heard about this, there being a limited number of fields that colleges have access to, and basically running out of fields to use. We've heard of other schools getting their IT department to implement a quick little form that gets redirected. So you have a form that's outside of your data system that then gets collected, gets stored in your data warehouse, and then you can merge it with your SIS. College coded that in Cold Fusion. That's getting into the weeds, but there's a few ways you can accomplish that. Another person says, we really need a better way to track who are our students, who are parents. We also need more daycare options. So this daycare on-campus care, is a huge thing. You can apply to see campus. Well, in the past, you could apply. That's one possible opportunity. Partnering with Head Start is one way to maybe get on-campus childcare. Dallas College discussed the need to increase resource awareness among student parents. Particularly, we talked about financial aid resource awareness. This is a huge topic that we've heard about in these summer sessions so far. Resources that, despite the very high need among students, sometimes underutilization of certain resources. We know the needs are high. We also know in some cases resources are underutilized. I think before, assuming that the students maybe actually don't need those resources after all, I think focusing on that resource awareness, communication, outreach is really important to make sure students are actually aware of that information. I've read some studies that said students sometimes just don't know. There's so much information. They're flooded with so much info, and sometimes students don't know what they could benefit from. We need to make some changes to the way requests are processed. We've seen information that some requests are too cumbersome or that there's too many steps needed. That can kind of lead to thinking that there's a lack of awareness if students feel like things are too complicated to navigate. We all know what it's like when you're super busy with a million things and then you have to figure out some complicated thing. That can be a challenge. We do not currently have accurate data collection means to identify student parents or their needs, but we have plans to implement this in the fall, beginning with student applications. That is great. We've seen a lot of information about future plans that folks have. We've learned that before we increase the amount of emergency aid that we award, we need to streamline the process that we have to award aid. This is something we've heard about a lot. One of the things I've heard from students themselves is the process of hearing that there's supports out there, then trying to apply for it and either finding out after a long process that they're rejected and they don't qualify, or just feeling like the process is overly complicated. I think simplifying these processes where possible and letting students be aware beforehand of what truly is available, making sure that it's very clear, if possible, whether or not they might qualify so that they don't seek out assistance and then become discouraged when it's not available. We were surprised by the age of parenting students in our data. It was older than we would have expected. This is definitely a trend we see nationally. Parenting students tend to be older, although young parents are common as well and do sometimes have a specific set of challenges. But older parents may be in different types of degrees, may have different needs. It's really important to consider age. A major challenge is that we are not gathering any data from adult ed, CE, and dual credit enrollments. I'm assuming CE is probably career-related education, CTE. Yes, and that's something that we've seen a lot, is that these systems can be siloed. Sometimes they have completely different data systems, completely different applications. It can duplicate the work stream to try and get data from everywhere. And we really encourage you to try and get data from especially those CTE, the workforce side of students and adult ed, but we also understand the challenges there. So it's definitely something maybe this is an opportunity to streamline some of these processes. One moment, please. So we discussed the need for faculty training, the resources available, as they spend the majority of the time with students. I cannot overstate personally how much I've seen this be a factor when hearing recently of how much faculty should be involved in this process, or at least be aware of it. Syllabi statements is something really interesting I've seen, where faculty can put on the syllabus that basically just saying, we're aware that some of you might be students. If you're having challenges, if the classroom policies are difficult because you're a parent, let us know. Sometimes faculty could even include in their syllabus some resources for student parents. Super useful to have faculty on board, because like you said, that's where students are for sure going to be engaged. It's hard sometimes to get students to notice emails and stuff when they're getting a flood of emails, but it could be important to get faculty involved. We talked specifically about how we will store our data and how we will mark parenting students. That's great. Talking through logistics, we know about data warehouses and how hard it can be to get all the data in the right place. Although we still have many areas of improvement, we are proud of the growth over the last 4 years. I saw this on a few Jamboards that folks were actually just acknowledging that they've really improved with basic skills connection, student outreach, working with students. I think that's great. And, this legislation has a lot of promise to further improve. We would like to collect data each semester to better understand the changing needs to best serve students in real time. This is a great goal. Like we said, a registration intake form or an on login questionnaire. Those two methods are great to think about. Registration intake form if you don't have one, or on login a little questionnaire. We've really seen those two things work well. We don't know that it's great to tie it to updating their email address or something like that, but when logging into their system, and then we recently saw another school that put a little student parent module right on a student's SIS portal so that they could see it there and update their parental status anytime. We need to continue working on obtaining parenting student data on campus childcare expansion and improve communicating services. Very true. These lower responses are not less important, but we're going to wrap up in a second. So I'm going to kind of skim through them really quickly. I just want to acknowledge how useful these insights are. We'll make sure to save these. We really appreciate you all sharing them. Need to be able to better identify parenting students, streamlining information for students to know where to go, to ensure the entire community college knows this process. No resources. This person was saying that there were no resources that they knew of for parenting back then. And that again could be a challenge. Is if there are resources, sometimes the information is just not readily available. So this is great that there's a questionnaire that lives in the student portal and students have the ability to update this information year round. That matches what I was just saying about a school we're working with in Oregon who just added the status to the student portal. They can update it anytime and they've gotten a huge number of responses. They said like they just implemented it and they already have like 800 responses. So students have resources that help with childcare, but need to be better about publicizing these. That is a huge theme. And again, it's a relatively minimal cost-effective use of your resources coming out of this. Like if all of y'all at your schools just do better, like just come away from this and increase one thing about how you communicate your resources, that will be a huge change. And that's a very reasonable change, I think, to make. Changes in the ways that requests are processed. Expanding awareness of available resources, methods for closing gaps. Don't currently have accurate data, but we have plans to implement this fall, starting with applications. Found that our resources were a bit scattered and hard to find. Will be consolidating. I love it. That is absolutely perfect. And like I said, I think totally doable. Not saying it's not a lot of work. That is work, but it's doable in the grand scheme of things compared to things like solving the childcare shortage problem. That's a doable topic and could make a big difference to a lot of students. Discuss the need for faculty training of the resources available. Again, super important. Oh, I think yeah. All right. Yep. So I think we are going to have a break now. I think that kind of covers the insights. I think that was so useful. We're going to come back in 5 minutes. I know it's not the longest break that there was, but we've got plenty more to talk about, and I think this is a really productive conversation. So enjoy your 5-minute break, and we will be back shortly. Again, thank you so much for the conversation, everybody.
I'm putting a little 5-minute timer here. Feel free to take a step away, and we'll see you soon. Well, that was a fun musical
Oh my gosh.
interlude.
Yeah.
I haven't
Welcome
used
back.
this timer option before.
That
All
was
right.
absolutely delightful.
Yeah. So we are back with a bang with that wonderful music. I don't know if everybody heard it, but
Let me,
welcoming us back.
Nathan, I
Yeah.
apologize for interrupting. Let me just get Kimberly up here on Spotlight with you because she's going to be
Oh yeah,
sharing
no
some
problem.
session. All right, we're good now.
Cool. Thank you, everybody. I hope you enjoyed your break. I know it was a little on the short side, but we're going to keep motoring here. We have just a lot of great things to talk about. And I just wanted to thank you again. It was really a joy to read all of those comments. I think I know we've kind of forgot to tell you all to get ready to do that, but you did a great job adapting and sharing some wonderful insights. And I think, there are some kind of general sentiments in there which are good, and there were some specific ideas which are also good. So I hope you've come away with this with some thoughts on where to go next. And we really want to encourage you to not forget about that profile of resources in the data summary. We really hope that even if you only discussed it now during the breakout, or if you worked on it between now and between last session and this session, we just really hope that you come back to those as resources going forward. And of course, we'll be sharing out after this. We hope you can see what other colleges learn, take away from that, revisit these resources. But this is a condensed session, so we're going to move forward. We're going to talk about a new topic. I'm going to say a few words about sharing power with pairing students, recap some things from session one really briefly, pass it to my colleague Kimberly Salazar, who's going to talk a little bit about this parenting student rubric that her and some other students helped come up with, some other current and former parenting students, which is really great. And then we're going to have our second session and keep moving here. So sharing power with parenting students, a rubric for engagement. So as we've seen, a lot of folks during this session so far have acknowledged the importance of engaging parenting students. In our D2A process so far, I just want to start by framing this. I cannot overstate how useful the partnership with parenting students has been so far. So we've seen colleges partner with parenting students in a number of different ways. Not only does it, from a very practical standpoint, take some effort off of college administrators by delegating responsibilities to parenting students so that they can move certain things forward. But it's also beneficial to the parenting students themselves. They gain experience, professional experience, things they can put on their resume. They can feel like they have a stake in what's going on and like they have some influence and power. There's just so many benefits to it. I won't go through them all. And I just want to recap some principles for minimizing threats to students. So data should always be used with students' consent and for their benefit. You should take the time to explain clearly to students why the college is asking for certain pieces of information and how those data elements will be used. I think that ties in perfectly to the increased awareness, communication efforts, increased information, and messaging. We've seen all of that in these conversations today. You might require an information campaign beyond explanatory language that's shared only when posing the question. So again, registration intake form, information around the status on their SIS, classroom syllabi, communication from faculty, communication in emails, representation on the website, so many little ways that you can signal welcoming, belonging, and comfort in sharing data for student parents. Students should be given the option to decline to provide sensitive or personal information that they do not wish to share with the college. We want those response rates to go up. We want students to feel comfortable with sharing, but if they're not comfortable with sharing, that's always okay. They can skip the question. That's what we recommend, at least. Colleges can and should engage students as partners in developing their data collection processes. And colleges should be candid with students on the role of the questions they're answering to support Title IX protections, to attract childcare funding, meet state requirements, etc. So it's always good to just be transparent. Why are you asking for this information? And what's it going to be used for? So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my colleague at the Urban Institute, Kimberly Salazar, who's going to talk a little bit more and introduce this rubric. So Kimberly.
Good morning, everyone. So went to sorry, it is 8 in the morning here. I'm in California, so my brain is a little scrambled. But the rubric, we're going to be discussing the rubric and how the student team member should co-lead and be a partner, and the importance of them being a partner in the process. And so when we're partnering with student parent, it's important to delegate meaningful responsibilities to parenting students while providing appropriate institutional and support and guidance. Some possible parenting student team member activities are: collect perspectives and insights and information from campus, student parent organizations, student government, and etc. through networking, informal conversations, interviews, or focus groups. Another activity can be create a student parent affinity or advisory group, or groups to support the data to action process. Groups could meet regularly to discuss topics or potential decisions and provide the team with important guidance. We had a really great example of this in San Diego Mesa, where a student parent was leading a student parent group. It was a much more informal, safe space, but there were moments in that group that informed some of the data to action practices that the San Diego Mesa team is thinking about implementing in their quantitative approach to collecting the data. Student parent team members can help organize or participate in activities to raise awareness about student parents and advocate for recommendations to improve conditions. They can participate in outreach and about the activities coming out of the D2A efforts, including to the student body, campus faculty, or staff and external partners. I know that a big way that I learned about resources was through peers and other student parents on campus. And through the Student Parent Center, they had more formal student parent groups that still remained slightly informal, but allowed for the sharing of space and sharing of resources to happen. The student parent team member activities can also include advocate for state and federal policies to better support parenting students in higher education through meeting with appropriate representations beyond the institution, and analyze resulting data with institutional researchers and develop engaging materials or processes to use these data while themselves gaining valuable research and analysis experience. Next slide, please. So currently on the data to action project right now, we have a SPAG group, which is the Student Parent Action and Advisory Group. From the Data to Action kickoff convening, the Urban Institute collaborated with parenting students to form SPAG, which are a board of 10 parenting students, student parent advisors. We are working through practical implementation of centering lived experience and building mechanisms for sustained student partnership. Myself, with my colleagues Kate and Afia, co-lead SPAG, and the whole process of developing our names and also the agenda and goal setting has all been in partnership with the student parents and parenting students in the advisory group. So SPAG ensures data to action effort is driven by both numbers and statistics and by student parent expertise. Next slide, please. Parenting student partnership. So what does this look like? We typically meet regularly to formulate guidance, recommendations, and strategies for elevating student parent expertise. The meetings are meant to be inclusive in the sense where we understand, as you all mentioned in the chat room, that student parents are face a lot of time poverty. And so in our meetings, we made it a goal that both synchronous and asynchronous engagement is a big part of our process. We keep closed captions on, and we also send out transcripts and video recordings of the meetings. It's been really helpful that a lot of parenting students have shared that sometimes the meeting conflicts with kiddo drop off, kiddo pickup, dinner time. And so we've made it a point to ensure that they have different systems of engagement, sending emails of thoughts of the recorded meetings, and a lot of asynchronous engagement has allowed us to make this the meeting as accessible as possible. And we've provided leadership opportunities. Student parents offered facilitating roles in group discussions within the overall data to action project, and opportunities for authorship. We are currently working through rubric and a blog post that will further inform this work and further inform how to partner with student parents. We will keep you all posted on that once it's published, but student parents in SPAG have had direct opportunity for direct authorship in this, and it's been amazing collaborating with the parenting students on different efforts of the project. Next slide, please. And so I will go ahead and share the link for the rubric in the chat so that if you'd like to review it as I'm talking more about it, it'll be here in the chat room. But the rubric for authentic engagement for student parents is something that was an outcome of the Student Parent Advisory Board. It's a self-assessment opportunity for partners working with student parents to assess how their institution is engaging with student parents. The purpose of the rubric is to guide and support initiatives engaging student parents, to demonstrate desired engagement criteria. Recognize, this is something that is very important with the rubric, is that we want to recognize that not only does change take time, but it's also a group effort, and it also wants to recognize the limitations such as budget, staffing, and time. And also, last but definitely not least, and it's one pillar that's super important to this rubric, is that we want to reduce shame for both the parenting student, but also we don't want this rubric to make the advisors, whether it's faculty, whether it's community, whether it's college themselves or external partners working with student parents, we do not want this to be a shaming tool where you might feel that there needs to be more work done in engaging with student parents as partners. We want this to be empowering for both the student parent and collaborators to incorporate student parent lived expertise in all the efforts that involve parenting students, caregivers, and as you all stated in the chat room, foster parents. So next slide, please. So some of our rubric principles is inclusion to change efforts, that student parents are strongly represented on boards, committees, or task forces and appropriately compensated, that we have inclusive spaces for events and meetings. So just as I was talking about the inclusivity within the Zoom meeting room, which is that the Zoom is recorded, that it's transcribed, and that there's closed captionings and it's shared for folks that potentially can't join the meeting synchronously. We want to also think about the environments that we're bringing in the student parents and create environments where parenting students feel welcome and valued. Inclusion in data collection, incorporating student parents' perspectives in data gathering, ensuring their unique needs and challenges are accounted for. Representation and community building, promoting visibility and representation of student parents, which is something that I see a lot of the colleges here value within the chat room, that the discussion on ways to ensure that they're feeling both seen and supported. And more importantly, we want to ensure that student parents have power, that parenting students are empowered, knowing their lived expertise and insights directly shape initiatives. We want to make sure that partnership is authentic and that we're valuing their identity as both a student, but also as experts of their own lives. Next slide, please, Nathan. So where you can access the rubric, I shared here the link on the tiny URL, and I'm also happy to share this tiny URL link in the chat room. And you can also use the QR code to access the rubric. I'll leave this here for a minute so that folks can access. And if there's any trouble with accessing the rubric, please feel free to put into the chat, and I'm sure one of my colleagues can help with troubleshooting.
Yeah, and as Teresa mentioned, it's the document called Student Parent Engagement Rubric dash Texas Fillable. So Teresa put that in the chat, and that's the one you should look for in that box folder.
All right. Next slide, please, Nathan.
Don't join the breakouts yet. Oh, I think we lost. Can we close the breakouts for a second? We weren't quite there yet. Sorry, we had a little bit of an early breakout there, but we have just a couple more pieces of instruction, then we'll be going to the rooms again. Go ahead, Kimberly.
Okay, so how the rubric works. Each principal has metrics of parenting students, and as Teresa mentioned, we use both parenting students, student parents interchangeably. We do incorporate caregiver terminology when there are caregivers present. Currently in SPAG, we just have parenting students, so that's why I'm using both just parenting students and student parent. But so parenting student engagement, a description, scores on a 3-level scale, and an explanation for why each is important. And the metrics are scored on the following scale: 2, promising practice; 1, emerging practice; and 0, minimal or absent practice. So for example, here is a section 1 on the rubric, which are student parents are included in change efforts. We have the principal, which is representation. Student parents, short for SPs, are strongly represented on boards, committees, teams, or task forces related to SP issues. And then you would go ahead and rate yourself either as 2, which is a promising practice; 2 or more SPs with diverse identities are included in each committee or task force to create SP change, or a student parent advisory group is created. 1 is emerging practice, and as we noted, we don't want this to be a tool for shame, so we notice that we note with our language that we understand that with emerging practice, even if it is noted as a 1, we understand that it's emerging and it's building and it takes time and that efforts are being made to get there. So here is 1 SP included on each committee or task force. And then we have 0, minimal or absent practice. No SP at the table when decisions are made about SP data, supports, or outcomes. And why? Some SPs can feel tokenized, being the only one in the room. Having strong and diverse representation is important to capture a range of SP perspectives. And then there's a section here for comments to be made by those filling out the rubric. Next slide, please. So we're going to be going into a breakout activity where we're going to be discussing this student parent power sharing rubric. I hope the rubric tiny URL link or the QR code worked for everyone, but if you had trouble accessing the rubric, please let us know in the chat. But the questions that you will be discussing in the breakout activities are: what are the overall reflections on the rubric? What are you doing? What are you doing right now from the rubric? How could you imagine incorporating items from the rubric into your practices both now and in the future? And how do you think that engaging parenting students could benefit your institutional leadership? Again, this rubric is meant to just be a tool of reflection and a tool to help guide the aims and goals of engaging with student parents. And so you're going to be broken into separate into college-specific groups and have discussions about the student-parent rubric. Each team, as we did in the chat room, should be ready to report back in the chat room one or two reflections shared from the Jamboard, and I will go ahead and post the tiny URL links onto the chat room. Thanks so much, everyone.
And it looks like, yeah, thank you, Kimberly, so much for introducing this activity. I just wanted to add, it looks like maybe there's some trouble happening with some of the tiny URLs. So just let us know if anything doesn't work and we can give you the real URL to everything. So just let us know in the chat if you're having any trouble with any of these tiny URLs that we're sharing. And we will provide the full links.
Apologies. I was saying, note that these are different Jamboard links than the last time around. So I just want to make sure that you know to switch up your Jamboard.
Yes, that is important. You should have the opportunity to join your breakouts right now, everybody. So please go ahead and do that. And just let us know in the chat if you have any questions. Thank you so much, everybody. Yeah, it looks like we're getting back to full capacity here. So once again, I just want to start with a big thank you. Firstly, I'm sorry for the tech issues. You know, we just always have one hiccup here or there in so much webinar and technology time. So I appreciate your patience for that. It was great that everybody kind of came back into the main room and resorted themselves with our fixed links. But again, we saw, I wish we had more time, but we saw great conversations happening on the Jamboards in the breakout room. So we really encourage you to just keep these conversations going after this breakout, after this summer session. We really want you and your team to keep thinking about these pieces. But for now, let's do the same thing. Let's share what your team discussed. I think that was awesome before with the first breakout. This is our last breakout of the day. What's one key takeaway from the rubric? Or is there an action you could take to partner with parenting students, or an idea that you had? Just any kind of reflection at all. It can be specific, it can be general. And if you want to have one nominee from each group put something in the chat, we'll read it just like last time. But also, you know, if you have a burning desire to share, even if someone else from your team did so, that's okay. Kimberly noted some really important themes that we saw. Brainstorming methods for student-parent compensation. This is a really interesting question. We've seen colleges tackle it a number of different ways. We've had some colleges who have had student parents be an employee of some kind. I think this is simpler when it's an alumni, but there are various ways that it can be done. But we have one college who actually has, or several colleges who have a student parent who is an actual employee of the school and has very legitimate responsibilities through that way. We've also seen stipends and scholarships. We've seen students simply compensated for their time during certain specific activities, either with incentives or other methods. We have also, so Kimberly also notes that colleges are acknowledging the need to brainstorm around student-parent engagement given time poverty and college turnover. So especially in shorter programs, some student parents may not be there for very long. I think an important thing to note is you can really get creative with this. So I've heard from parents who have started parent groups, and it can be a challenge when the leaders of those groups graduate. And maybe it's a really difficult challenge for them to correctly, or not correctly, but to pass the baton to new leaders. That's something that the school can help with, basically noting, partnering with student groups and being a partner and keeping those groups alive when students graduate, and just making sure that the baton gets passed to new students. And even if students are running the group, that's a place where administration can help step in and support these groups. But there's many other methods that can be undertaken, and the rubric has many ideas for them. Many colleges acknowledging that they're in the beginning stages, seeing the rubric as a good tool for identifying gaps and thinking about ideas. The balancing act of taking responsibility for what we're doing, praising ourselves for where we are, appreciating context to build confidence in the rubric as a tool, and lots of plans for including student parents were noticed in this rubric, which I think is awesome. We saw a lot of colleges talking about wanting to be more intentional, saying we're doing stuff right now kind of generally, but we want to be more intentional and specific. So here's some thoughts from the chat. The rubric offers a great breakdown of elements to consider in a robust plan for supporting student parents. As a college, we support them day-to-day in the background activities. However, we have not targeted and they're not meaningful activities that are driven by not only our faculty and staff, but also student parents. We're going to look into building an organization in student services for student parents, just like we have organizations and groups for veterans. I think that's awesome. Such an organization, can be built by the students and for the students with faculty support. Students can take on a lot of the effort as long as faculty provide the framework and the support to do it. And that can make a huge difference to students on campus. Just knowing that there's a group that they could join even can make them feel more welcomed, even if they choose not to join the group. And that's something that in recent conferences and hearing from students, we've heard be massively successful. Again, while we have students involved in various organizations and committees, and it's imperative to provide a student-parent affinity group or advisory council. Again, so important. So many ideas can come out of it. Having student-parent representation on a board of advisors or student groups can just be absolutely crucial to make sure they're not left out, and it's not assumed that every student is a quote-unquote traditional, straight out of high school college student, which I know at community colleges, I know y'all are well aware that that's frequently not the case, but still just making sure that student parents feel welcomed. We have an exciting journey ahead of us. We are preparing to move from an infant stage to a promising practice stage. I love it. So I want to emphasize that this rubric, what we're doing in this breakout right now is your reflections on the rubric. There is a scoring system, of course. You can use it to gauge where you're at. We're not asking yourselves to go in and be hard on yourselves right now with this rubric, to feel like you're, like you haven't been doing enough, or, to feel bad about anything just based on this rubric. Our questions right now are not about your score. They are about, like this comment says, an exciting journey ahead of you. It's ideas. It's a way to move from promising practices to better practices. Anything that you can implement to move from a 0 to a 1, any category in the future or whatever, will just be, a bonus to your students, and a great future ahead. At this point, we haven't established an opportunity for mentoring, but that could be a really effective way to enhance student parents' feeling of belonging on and off campus. And this is something we've heard about so much, is this feeling of just belonging. Massively important for students feeling like they have, like they are supposed to be where they are, and like they are on their own journey to academic success. We have some areas in which we can improve. Again, rubric is not meant to make you feel bad about anything, but it should hopefully identify areas where there are gaps, where improvement is possible, and it should give you some ideas for how to build on. Kimberly, who again is heavily responsible for the creation of this rubric, notes that it is a brainstorming and reflection tool, a supportive tool to help everyone's team move up and move the needle forward together. So again, ideas for how to build. I wanted to note that many schools I saw in the Jamboards did note some things that they do now, which is great. It's good to acknowledge the successes that you have had. Some schools acknowledged that they already involve parenting students in certain activities, and some have parent-friendly spaces or policies. Here's a comment about faculty adding statement to syllabi, welcoming parenting students to meet and discussing any parenting needs, barriers, goals, successes, etc. The point is to increase open communication and belonging. Totally agreed. If you can just put yourself in that position, many of you probably have been in that position, but putting yourself in that position of being in class, a stressful course that, is really important for your academic career, feeling overwhelmed by work, childcare, especially if you don't have that family support, which some folks do not. It's lucky for those who do, but some folks don't. And trying to succeed in class, and just hearing that acknowledgement from the faculty at the start of a class that they know some folks are parents, that could be a challenge, that, if they're identifying resources is great, but even just acknowledging it is huge. It's a great tool that shows us what we're doing right and areas we can improve on. That is what we hope. Again, just a tool for reflection and growth, like Kimberly said, not punitive in any way whatsoever. And then let's see. Another thing that I wanted to highlight, some folks mentioned on the rubric, incentives for surveys and focus groups. A lot of folks have asked, how can we involve our parenting students? having your parenting student lead a focus group, and having incentives for parenting students to participate in those focus groups, or even have focus groups that are not necessarily specific to parenting students, but having a parent lead the focus group. Learning experience for the parent who leads the focus groups. You can ask specific questions related to things that you're doing. So you can really dive into the weeds of like, what have you heard about? What resources are you aware of? What were your challenges when you tried to access those resources? Is the way that we're asking for your parental status, does that feel right to you? Did you feel comfortable answering that? You know, what ways would you want to partner with faculty? You know, what were your feelings in the classroom about whether or not you felt welcome as a parent? You know, when do you feel welcome on campus? What sources of childcare do you seek out? These are all questions that you can ask in a focus group. And it's a great opportunity for a parent and student to lead the group from it. And again, you know, focus group can be a good amount of work, but if you have a parenting student who's leading that effort, then you can have them do that. And it's not as much work for you, and the parenting student learns a lot, builds professional experience, research experience, and you get information from your students. So it's a win-win-win idea, something that's really important, and we really encourage. We know there's a lot of surveying and focus groups already happening. We're cognizant of that. So you want to think about ways to, you know, spread it out, make sure you don't over survey your students. But that's a great option that we've seen a lot of schools do. Someone is saying they like that idea. Independent student credit, work study positions, research support positions, student leadership initiatives are all ways to compensate student parents. Agreed. Oh yeah, thank you, Teresa, for sharing that. Please read that please watch that recording. We did a training on how to conduct a focus group and how parenting students could lead focus groups, and the colleges that we're working with have been doing that. So we're working with, I'm not sure how many of the 10 colleges we're working with through the other D2A project that have done a focus group, but the answer is a lot of them. Okay. This is great. So I think we are, if I'm not mistaken, I think we're pretty much at break time now. If anyone has other thoughts that you want to toss in the chat, please do so. And just like before, we will share back with you the results of the Jamboards. We're going to start a 5-minute break now. We're in the home stretch, so you'll come back nice and fresh for the last, and you'll come back nice and fresh for the last 20 minutes. Teresa's going to bring us home and set us up for session 3. We really appreciate your participation and enjoy your break.
Take us through the home stretch here. You all have been such wonderful thought partners, participants, and collaborators in this series so far. And we just really appreciate your thoughtfulness in this work, which we know is a lot to take in a very condensed format. So with that, I will talk a little bit about what we're hoping to accomplish for next time. Stakeholder mapping and visibility plan. And as a note, we know that a month between sessions isn't enough time to fully do all of the elements of these activities, which many folks spend, you know, iterations of more time and a larger group in developing. But we are hoping that having some initial and preliminary efforts to look at these materials will give you some thoughts about where you want to build forward and how this could be helpful for your pathways work as you move into the new academic year. Okay. So the first element of this is stakeholder mapping. So the idea is who should be informed about and engaged in this work as you started to take stock of the resources, of the data, you developed a team, you're thinking about how to move towards a vision and goals that you want to establish for the longer term focus of this work. Thinking about who should be part of that process. So the first activity is a stakeholder map where you can brainstorm and add stakeholders that are relevant to student parents in 3 categories. So the first is student groups at your college who might be parents or invested in this work, non-student college partners such as faculty, staff of offices and facilities, administrators, students' parents, alumni, and community partners, so nonprofit organizations, government agencies, faith communities, other education institutions, and others. These are just ideas. You can have a chance to draw a line connecting your team to stakeholders you've already engaged. I'll show you what this looks like in just a moment. And you can then star or circle groups of stakeholders you'd like to engage for a deeper level of the work. So thinking about those who might be part of data collection or goal setting efforts, and others that you want to just inform about what you're doing because they should know and they would benefit from that, or you would benefit from them knowing about it. So in the map I'm going to show, it's just an example. You can adjust the mapping process to be useful to your college, creating different boxes, different circles that'll help you. So let me just show you the template. So we start with we call it the D2A team, implementation team, pathways lead team, the different terminology, but the team that you're thinking of as the core to this work. And around that team, we can think of groups of students. So, and then outside of that, we can think of non-student college stakeholders, and outside that, community stakeholders, which community can be broadly construed. That can be everything from your local area to national funders, for example, if you want to try to apply for a grant or get other kinds of support. So within the groups of students, some examples of students that might be relevant to this work include things like if there is already a student caregiver group or the Student Government Association, perhaps student faith groups, groups that relate to different student identities like Latinx student groups or Black Student Union, first generation student groups, and thinking about others. I'm sure each of you have a long list of student organizations at your institution and understanding who might have interest in this work. And then you can think about non-student college stakeholders. So some of the examples we put here, we put a lot because we just want to get the thinking going. That doesn't mean you have to have a lot. And you can also be more specific, like if you want to put people's names versus just the name of an office. But we have, going from the bottom left here, institutional research, teaching and learning innovation office, non-traditional student center, faculty senate, food services staff, library staff. So thinking about those services on campus. If there's a campus childcare center, the Dean of Students Office, the Office of the President, alumni relations. You can also think about your, recruitment and communications office or others that could be relevant to either inform about this work or to have engaged in conversation about that'll help contribute to your goal setting and developing your broader vision for where you want to go. And some community stakeholders. So, for example, starting in the top left here this time, a local nonprofit, a local church, a funder or philanthropy, a children's museum. Actually, we have great examples of colleges partnering with children's museums. It's like a really fun partnership and actually beneficial on both sides. Over here on the top right, we have housing authority or other housing providers, community food pantries, human services office, thinking about a lot of those partnerships you probably already have, but may not be framed around your student parent work in particular. Or maybe it kind of is, but hasn't been explicitly named that way. And so thinking about ways to sort of have them be engaged explicitly around supporting student parents. And then you can draw some lines, right? So maybe you draw lines on ones you're already working with. Oh, you've already connected with student government, dean of students, campus childcare, and you can do other things. I mean, this is all in a PowerPoint template at that same link, which we'll put in the chat. It's not already there. That you can play with, move things around, connect things, star things, color things, however it makes sense for you to be able to kind of think about the community that is relevant for the pregnant parenting student work that you want to support. So once you kind of mapped who those stakeholders are that you want to be engaged in the conversation, thinking about how you want to inform them about this work and get input. And we've sort of framed this in two ways. So the first is building awareness. So announcing that you're doing efforts related to whether it's the Data to Action campaign or whether it's just about your student parent liaison and the focus that you're putting onto the population of parenting students on your campus, but making people aware that you're doing it and also just broadly about student parent issues. And I'll give some examples of ideas for that. And the second is generating discussion. So you can think of building awareness being sort of sharing out and generating discussion about inviting others into conversation, sharing ideas and insights that it can inform goal setting. So thinking about building awareness. So here's some ideas that we suggested, and I'm sure you can think of many more, but you can think about educational or informational sessions. So there's a really great mini series of 7-minute documentaries called Raising Up. I think it's 5 videos in all, but doing like a screening or a discussion where you show one or more of those. Once they're focused on like childcare, housing, workforce issues. There's a general one about student parents and then one about mental health. And you can also do something where you're doing sort of a teach-in about your state's legislation related to student parents, so people know what's happening in Texas around student parent supports. You can invite and feature community partners who specialize in issues related to student parents, thinking about fatherhood, young parent, or mentorship programs, perhaps. And then so this came up earlier in some of the comments, but thinking about training for faculty members, staff, or others about student parent issues, as well as the resources that are available, how they can offer classroom supports or the legislation, but for that faculty and employee audience. And there's been different ways. I know you all probably have great professional development platforms, but thinking about where you can kind of do like, you know, we talked to one college that was doing a neat module that was asynchronous, but basically faculty could get like a badge if they went through this module through the learning management system about student caregivers on the campus. And it was helpful for them to be able to have that as a resource they can refer back to and also engage with on their own time while having a way to show that they had done that. When you're doing an event, of course, if it's in person or synchronous, thinking about the venue. If you want to co-sponsor with a college officer group, like maybe you can do it in partnership with student government, for example. And if there are other ways for people who are interested to engage remotely or asynchronously, thinking about that accessibility piece for busy student parents who may live further away from campus. Of course, if you host events in person, thinking about childcare, food, transportation support as feasible to try to reduce barriers to engagement and making it something fun where it can be a family focused for those who have children or other members of their family that they might want to engage in these conversations. Other ideas include featuring, say, members of your team on the college website, excuse me, or social media, including the student parent member. There's also, you can think about whether you might want to build a larger visibility campaign for parents at the college, maybe with student biographies or stories, or, excuse me, emphasizing their advocates or champions. I have a frog in my throat today, apologies. You can invite others to engage on social media or college discussion forums. So thinking about news sharing outlets like listservs or college newspapers, letters from the president. And you can raise important ideas, questions, or insights from the work to boost engagement. So if you post on LinkedIn or on Instagram or on Facebook or whatever, prompting with a question or something that gets people to give their input is always helpful. And finally, thinking about visibility for broader student parent efforts generally. So you can work with college communications to get more pictures of student parents in college marketing materials. You can think about having, we've talked about this in the chat, but faculty acknowledging or accommodating parenting students in the classroom, like syllabus statements, or thinking about this faculty's unexpected absence policies and what they need in terms of documentation or allowable absences and other policies in the classroom that relate to students being able to continue to engage. So here's a couple of, these are just screenshots of some nice like profiles of student parents. This one on the left is from Cal Poly SLO, California Polytechnic Institute, San Luis Obispo, which was a profile of Maya Vowry, who is a student parent, and others on the campus. They did a little piece in the college newspaper. This one in the upper right was from Ascend at the Aspen Institute that talked about a student father who, and just these really nice sort of profiles that elevate the visibility and people's awareness of student parents. So we just like these examples, but there are many others. So that was all things about building awareness. Now thinking about generating discussion. So hosting community discussions, forums, and events. So including a data walk or other participatory facilitation, perhaps to share the preliminary insights from the data summaries and profiles of existing resources. So I shared a link in the chat from a training that we did. These links in here lead to more general descriptors of data walks and participatory facilitation. But these are ways to get people to not just be kind of recipients of information, but to engage with the information that you're sharing out in that give and take conversation. So thinking about, does this surprise you? Does this reflect your experience at the college? What more do you want to know? How can the college understand and support student parents better? And it's not just student parents that give that input. Of course, they will have a special perspective, but other students may also observe what's happening and be able to give, and other stakeholders across the institution and in the community might be able to give meaningful insights. You can think about focus groups with different groups of stakeholders to understand the depths of their experiences and ideas for improvement. So that could be student parents. It could also be with faculty. It could be with community partners. Nathan mentioned that. It was really nice idea about having the student parents themselves facilitate perhaps some of those. And also surveying student parents. I know that we're in the moment where there's a lot of surveys, there's a lot of data collection. We might not want to push out another thing. So we put it here as a thought, but we understand that surveys right now, might be one more ask that's a little harder to float right with all this new data collection stuff happening. But it's still a really powerful resource for getting a broad viewpoint of what people want and need. So with all this, we have a template for a visibility plan. It has a lot of elements in it, and we've been talking about where and how to sort of prioritize these. You don't have to fill this out for every single thing, but I do think it's helpful if you kind of think in the homework about one activity or event that you think could be useful and go through these steps just to sort of plan it out a bit. So the name, is the goal for visibility? Is the goal discussion? Is the goal other? So really specifying what you're trying to get out of it. What do you hope will come out of the session? And how does that help support the development of the goal of your student parent goals, your data to action goals? What outcomes will the attendees get out of the session? What are they going to gain from being there? How you will describe the session to others. So just a session description, key staff who will lead or facilitate. Think about possible co-leaders from outside the established team. How parenting students will co-lead, if at all. Is there space for that? And what could that look like? If you need any preparation or materials, or if you need institutional review board or other sign-offs sometimes for, if you do like a focus group, if it's a data collection effort, if it's for internal improvement, you usually don't need institutional research review. But if you plan to sort of publish something from it or for broader learning, anyhow, talk with your IR office about those reviews that might or might not be needed, but thinking through that. Scheduled or target timing of the activity. Will it occur more than once? What's a good time in the semester? Is it early? Is it mid-time? Is it towards the end? Target activity, and how many people are you expecting to engage and what format? How will you promote or recruit for the activity? Other partners or allies who could help with promotion or recruitment and how they can help. And finally, are there any possible roadblocks or challenges? And what are strategies that you could address those? So you don't have to do this for every single thing, but I think working through at least one activity, even if it's sort of a hypothetical, would be helpful in thinking through like who could be partners in building out more visibility and discussion around this work. So again, we have these materials in that box folder. I hope this tiny URL is working. If not, we'll give you the direct link again. Sorry for our URL challenges today. But you should be able to see the visibility template in that folder. And we're always glad to be a resource as you're working through it. There's both the visibility template, and the stakeholder mapping. The stakeholder map is a PowerPoint that you can edit, and the visibility template is a Word document that you can edit. So with that, we are 6 minutes till the end of the hour, and we know it's been a full morning, but wanted to open up the floor for any final reflections, questions, thoughts from the group. And Kimberly hopefully shared links in the chat. Feel free to go off mute or be able to put comments in the chat and the questions in the chat, and then we'll talk about this for just a minute, and then we'll give here's our contact information if you want to reach out directly to me, Nathan, or Kimberly. And we'll also pass it back to Christina and team for a final few words. But please do feel free to put any final reflections or thoughts. I appreciate. Thank you for
Thank you so much, Teresa and Nathan and Kimberly. We're just so grateful to have your expertise in this space. And thank you to all the college team members. It means a lot for you to spend this time with us and think about the systems and structures you can put in place for your student parents. We'd love to know how we did on this session and how we may improve for the next one. So if you have a minute, if you would please take our short survey, you can see the link there and a QR code, but I also just put the direct link into the chat. I promise it's short and sweet, but we look forward to seeing you next time. I'll be in touch in the coming weeks with the recording and the slides and the other resources from today's session. I'll also remind you of the third session and send a link if there's any final team members that need to join or register for that session as well. But I just want to take this opportunity again to thank you for doing this important work for our student parents, and to thank the Urban Institute team for preparing these resources and sharing their expertise with all of us as well.